At the millionaire's house, the waitress is stunned to see her childhood photo on the wall. She thought it was just another catering job, until a forgotten hallway, a dusty frame, and a childhood photo shattered her world. A waitress raised by strangers. A billionaire's mansion hiding unspeakable secrets. And a family legacy built on betrayal. When Riley Bennett saw her own 5-year-old face smiling from the wall of the Hawthorne estate, she realized sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it comes back to claim you. The grand Hawthorne estate stood like a sleeping giant under the low Charleston sky, its marble driveway gleaming under the setting sun. Towering white columns guarded the entrance like silent sentinels, and the sweet scent of jasmine drifted through the warm summer air. It was a world far removed from Riley Bennett's own, a world she had only ever glimpsed through the glass of impossible dreams. At 23, Riley was no stranger to hard work. Raised by loving but struggling adoptive parents, she'd balanced school and 2 jobs since she was 17. Tonight, serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres to South Carolina's elite was supposed to be just another paycheck, one more tiny step toward her bigger dreams. No drama, no mistakes, no attention. Clutching her silver tray, Riley tightened the ties of her black apron and repeated her mantra under her breath. Stay invisible. Get paid. Go home. The catering van bumped to a halt at the side entrance of the mansion. Riley hopped out, joining a line of servers moving briskly through the heavy oak doors. Inside, the estate was a masterpiece of old money and new ambition. Soaring ceilings, velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers that seemed to weep light from above. Everything gleamed, everything whispered, "Lie down. No talking to guests. Do your job right and you'll leave with your pay," barked Frederick, the Hawthorne's notoriously strict head butler. Riley nodded silently, balancing her tray as she moved into the ballroom, where Charleston's most powerful gathered in tuxedos and silk gowns. The night blurred into a rhythm, polished shoes gliding across marble floors, the soft clink of champagne glasses, the strained laughter of political deals and society gossip. Riley floated through it all, a shadow among giants. Until she saw it. A narrow hallway, half lit and deserted, branched off from the main ballroom. Something about it called to her, a thread of curiosity pulling tight against the rules she'd been given. One glance over her shoulder, no one watching. She slipped down the corridor. The atmosphere shifted immediately, quieter, heavier, the air thick with the weight of memory. The walls were lined with portraits of solemn-faced men and elegantly poised women, generations of Hawthornes staring out from their gilded frames. But midway down the hall, a single modest black frame hung, almost swallowed by the grandeur around it. Riley stopped. The tray slid down her fingertips, almost tumbling to the floor. The photograph inside the frame was simple, black and white, a little girl no older than 5, wearing a yellow dress, dimples flashing, a small scar just above her right eyebrow. It was her. Her hands shook, her breath hitched. It was her. It had to be. Every detail burned into her memory. The soft curls of her hair, the shy smile, even the small gap between her baby teeth. She had never been inside this house before, never met anyone named Hawthorne. And yet, here she was, captured in time, smiling from the walls of a billionaire's mansion like she belonged. A chill slid down her spine. She whispered into the empty air. Footsteps echoed from the ballroom. Panic snapped her back to reality. She darted away, clutching her tray like a lifeline, blending once again into the sea of black suits and glittering dresses. But inside her, a storm was brewing. One photograph had unraveled everything she thought she knew about herself. If her childhood photo hung inside the Hawthorne estate, it meant someone knew her. Someone had hidden her past. And someone was still hiding it. That night, long after the last guests staggered out and the last crystal flute was polished, Riley sat alone on the edge of her narrow bed in her small apartment on Edgewood Street. The city lights flickered outside, Her adoptive parents slept soundly down the hall, blissfully unaware of the hurricane swirling inside their daughter. Staring at the ceiling, Riley replayed the moment over and over. The hallway, the frame, the undeniable recognition. She needed answers. She deserved them. But some truths, she would soon learn, don't come easy. Some secrets are buried because powerful men intend to keep them buried. And if Riley wanted to uncover the truth about who she really was, she would have to risk everything. Section 1. A first whisper of the past. The next morning, Charleston wore a heavy mist like a veil, softening the edges of the historic city into something dreamlike, and for Riley Bennett, something foreboding. She stirred her coffee absently at the kitchen table. Across from her, Gloria Bennett, the woman who had raised her with tired hands and a kind heart, hummed to herself, unaware of the war raging inside Riley. "Mark, do you remember where I came from, before the adoption?" The words slipped out before Riley could stop them. Gloria paused mid-sip, setting her floral mug down with a soft clink. "That's a strange question, honey," she said slowly, studying Riley with narrowed eyes. "Why do you ask?" Riley hesitated. How could she explain? How could she tell the woman who had loved her all her life that everything Riley believed about herself might be a lie? "I just feel like there's something missing," Riley said, forcing her voice steady. "Like, a part of me I don't know." For a moment, Gloria looked stricken, then her face softened with motherly sorrow. "All we were ever told," she said gently, "was that you were found at a shelter. They said your parents had died, a car accident, I think. That's all the paperwork said." "A car accident." The words landed in Riley's chest like a blow. She had heard them before, last night, whispered by Martha, the cook at the Hawthorne estate. "Andrew Hawthorne and his wife died in a car crash," Martha had said. What some say, not everything was what it seemed. Riley's heart raced. The coincidences were stacking too high. A photo. The accident. A lost little girl. Was she really Riley Bennett, or someone the world had tried to erase? That night, the Hawthorne estate loomed larger than ever in Riley's mind, a fortress of secrets and stolen memories. She knew she had to go back. Under the cover of a second catering assignment, blessedly accepted without question, Riley returned to the estate 2 nights later. But this time, she wasn't just serving cocktails. She was hunting for pieces of her soul. The ballroom buzzed with life, the glitter of gowns, the tinkling of a string quartet, the low murmurs of Charleston's most dangerous elite. But Riley barely heard it. She moved like a ghost through the corridors, her eyes scanning every shadow, every frame. She crept back to the hallway, a narrow corridor where her past had first whispered to her. But when she reached the spot where the black and white photo had once hung, it was gone. Only a faint, clean rectangle on the wall remained, an empty wound where her 5-year-old smile had once been frozen in time. Her stomach twisted. Had someone seen her looking at it? Had they taken it down to hide the truth? She wasn't imagining this. She knew what she saw. And now, someone knew she had seen it too. In the quiet staff kitchen, under flickering fluorescent lights, Riley found Martha chopping onions with mechanical precision. "Busy night," Riley said casually, heart hammering in her chest. Martha didn't look up. "It always is when the Hawthorns gather," she said, a strange sadness clinging to her words. Riley leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "You've worked here a long time, haven't you?" Martha's knife slowed. "Long enough to know," she said, eyes flicking up sharply, "that asking too many questions around here can get you hurt." Riley swallowed hard, but she couldn't stop herself. Did Andrew Hawthorne have a daughter? For a heartbeat, the kitchen seemed to freeze. Martha's hand trembled slightly before she set the knife down with a soft clack. "There were rumors," she said slowly. "After the crash, people whispered about a little girl, said she disappeared, Some said she died with them, others that she was taken away. Taken away? Riley repeated, her voice barely a breath. Martha met her eyes for the first time, a look so heavy it nearly crushed her. I know, Martha said, is that after the crash, Charles Hawthorne took control of everything. Fast, too fast. And anyone who asked questions either quit or got real quiet. The weight of those words settled like lead in Riley's chest. Someone had erased her life. And now, someone was making sure she never found the pieces. That night, back at her apartment, Riley stared at the ceiling, the same question burning through her like wildfire. Who am I really? The next step was clear. If she wanted the truth, she had to go deeper. Risk more. Even if it meant stepping straight into the lion's den. Even if it meant confronting the man who might have stolen her past and her very identity. Section 2. The disappearing evidence and the dangerous warning. The third night back at the Hawthorne estate was different. The air was heavier. The walls seemed to lean closer, as if the house itself knew Riley Bennett was no longer just a servant. She was a threat. Dressed again in her black catering uniform, she moved through the gilded halls like a shadow. But tonight, she wasn't just searching for answers, she was looking for proof. Something, anything to anchor the truth she had begun to uncover. Somewhere deep inside this house were pieces of her stolen life. She could feel it. The party bustled around her, sharp laughter, the clink of expensive glass, the murmur of deals sealed with handshakes and fake smiles. Riley tuned it all out. She had one goal: find the missing photo. Carefully, she retraced her steps to the hallway where she had first seen it. Nothing. The walls were scrubbed clean, as if no memory, no evidence had ever existed. Her heart pounded. Someone had known she was looking. Someone powerful enough to erase traces within hours. She turned to leave, but froze. Down the hall, standing half in shadow, was a man watching her. He was tall, older, wearing a crisp black suit that didn't quite hide the bulk of muscle underneath. His expression was unreadable. Riley forced herself to look away and walk calmly back toward the ballroom. But inside, she was shaking. Later that night, she slipped into the kitchen for a break, pretending to refill her water glass. The staff bustled around her, oblivious. She spotted Marcus, the long-side security guard Marker had mentioned. A man rumored to know more than he ever said. Riley approached carefully, heart hammering. "You've worked here a long time, right?" she asked, voice casual. Marcus gave her a slow, calculating look. "Long enough." She hesitated, then said, almost in a whisper, "Did Andrew Hawthorne have a daughter?" For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he wiped his hands on a towel and leaned in. "Careful, girl," he said quietly. "Some truths get people disappeared around here." Riley's blood ran cold. But she couldn't back down now. "I think I'm connected to them," she said, her voice trembling despite herself. "I found something. A photo of me in this house." Marcus's face darkened. "You need to leave it alone," he said, low and urgent. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Please," Riley begged. "I have to know." He glanced around, then scribbled something quickly on a scrap of paper and slipped it into her palm. "Find Eleanor," he muttered. "She used to be head housekeeper. She knows, but be careful." Not everyone wants the past dragged into the light. Before she could thank him, he was gone, melting back into the crowd like smoke. Back home that night, Riley unfolded the scrap of paper with shaking hands. Eleanor Martin, 12 Red Cedar Lane. A lead. Maybe her only one. But as she stared at the address, a knock sounded at her apartment door. Sharp rap. Her heart seized. No one ever came to visit her at this hour. Slowly, cautiously, she crossed the room and peered through the peephole. Nobody there. Just the empty hallway. But when she opened the door, a single white envelope lay on the mat. No name, no return address. With trembling fingers she opened it. Inside was a single note. Stay away from the Hawthorns. You don't belong. Last warning. No signature. No explanation. Just a threat written in neat, mechanical script. Riley sank to the floor, clutching the note. She had two choices. Walk away, pretend she never saw the photo, let the secrets rot in their beautiful tombs. Or, even if it meant risking everything. Even if it meant facing a family that had already proven how far they would go to protect their empire. Riley wiped her tears away with the back of her hand. Her choice was clear. She would find Eleanor. She would rip the truth out of the shadows, no matter what it cost her. Because somewhere behind the glittering facade of the Hawthorne name lay the answer to the question that had haunted her whole life. Who am I? And she wasn't leaving until she knew. Session 3. The Keeper of Lost Memories. The morning air was thick with the scent of rain as Riley Bennett turned her aging Honda Civic onto a narrow country road lined with ancient oaks. Each mile that ticked by seemed to tighten the knot in her chest. 12 Red Cedar Lane. The address Marcus had risked himself to give her. At the end of the gravel road, a small weathered house sat tucked between the trees, its white paint peeling, its porch sagging with age, but still somehow dignified, like an old soldier refusing to bow. Riley parked and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Was she ready for what she might hear? Was she ready to finally face the truth? There was only one way to find out. She climbed the creaking steps and knocked. A long pause. Then the door swung open. An elderly woman stood there, her dark eyes sharp despite the years, her posture proud. "Eleanor Martin?" Riley asked. The woman studied her for a long, agonizing moment. I wondered how long it would take for you to find me," Eleanor said, her voice low, steady, and filled with something Riley couldn't quite place. Pity, sorrow, fear. Inside the house was simple but warm. Faded quilts, the scent of lemon polish, the ticking of an old clock somewhere in the back room. Riley sat on the edge of a threadbare armchair while Eleanor poured tea into mismatched cups. "You were just a baby when I last saw you," Eleanor said softly as she handed Riley a cup. "Your mama used to call you her little sunbeam." Riley's throat tightened. "Tell me everything," she whispered. Eleanor settled into her chair with a heavy sigh, her hands cradling her tea as if it could shield her from the memories she was about to unearth. "Your father, Andrew Hawthorne, was a good man," Eleanor began. "Too good for that world he was born into. He married Helena, not for money but for love. They adored you, Riley. Every moment of every day they lived for you." Riley clutched the cup so hard her fingers ached. Charles followed it. Eleanor's mouth twisted into something bitter. Charles wanted it all. The estate, the companies, the name. Andrew was standing in his way. Eleanor's voice dropped, trembling slightly. "The night of the crash. It wasn't an accident, child." Riley's breath caught. "Is arranged," Eleanor said, the words heavy as stones. "The brakes on Andrew's car. Cut. The investigators were paid off. Helena's family threatened into silence. And you..." She looked at Riley, tears welling in her old eyes. "You disappeared." Riley shook her head, disbelief warring with fury. He croaked. "How did I survive?" He reported, his voice barely heard. "But Helena, at the last minute she asked me to keep you for the evening, said she had a bad feeling. Mother's instinct, maybe." Eleanor's voice broke. "I tucked you into bed in the servants' quarters while they drove into the night, and never came back." The room spun. All her life, Riley had believed she was abandoned, convict, forgotten. But now she knew the truth. Her parents had fought for her, had died loving her, had been stolen from her. "I tried to keep you safe," Eleanor whispered, her hands trembling. But Charles was swift, ruthless. He controlled the estate within days, and when I tried to speak up, I lost everything. My job, my home, my reputation. Riley stared at her, heart breaking for the woman who had tried to protect her when no one else did. His voice choked. "You sent me away." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "I didn't know where they took you. The system buried you under a different name. All I had was hope that one day you'd come back." And here she was, flesh and blood, a living testament to everything they had tried to destroy. Eleanor reached for a battered tin box from the side table. She opened it, pulling out a yellow envelope, trembling slightly. Inside was a single photograph. A younger Eleanor, standing in the gardens of the Hawthorne estate, holding a little girl, curly-haired, dimpled, laughing in the sun. Riley stared at the picture. It was her. Proof. Real, undeniable proof that she had once belonged there. "Child Hawthorne has built his empire on stolen blood," Eleanor said bitterly. "He's kept his hands clean by making others do the dirty work." Riley clenched her fists. The anger inside her no longer felt like fear. It felt like fire. She stood, the photograph clutched tightly in her hand. "I'm going to make him pay," she said, voice shaking but certain. Eleanor looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If you go down this road, child, there's no turning back," she said. "He'll come after you. He'll destroy anything you love to keep his secrets buried." "I'm not afraid," Riley said, though the truth was, she was terrified. But fear didn't matter. The truth mattered. Her parents' memory mattered. She would reclaim her name, her past, or she would burn the Hawthorne empire to the ground trying. As Riley stepped out into the grey afternoon, the first drops of rain began to fall, dotting the earth like tiny pinpricks of silver. She tilted her face to the sky, letting the cold drops mix with the tears on her cheeks. Somewhere out there, her parents were watching. And for the first time in her life, Riley Bennett, no, Ray Evelyn Hawthorne, was not running from her past. She was charging straight toward it. Section 4. The Hidden Safe and the Mother's Final Letter. The rain had turned to a cold mist by the time Riley Bennett pulled into the small service lot behind the Hawthorne estate. Tonight wasn't about catering. Tonight wasn't about blending into the crowd. Tonight was about taking back her life. Her heart thundered in her chest as she slipped through the back entrance wearing the familiar black uniform. No one paid her any attention, just another server, another shadow. But inside, Riley was burning. She moved swiftly, staying close to the walls, weaving between kitchens and side halls until she reached the grand staircase. Third floor, Charles Hawthorne's private study. The forbidden room. The one place that held the answers she needed. The corridors were nearly empty. Most guests were still drinking and laughing in the ballroom downstairs. Her sneakers made no sound on the thick Persian rugs as she climbed the staircase, each step heavier than the last. Finally, she reached the heavy oak door. It loomed before her like a gate to another world. Her hand shook as she twisted the brass knob. It was unlocked. The door creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. The study was exactly what she had imagined. A cathedral of dark wood and heavy velvet curtains. Cigar smoke clung to the air. Leather-bound books lined the walls like silent witnesses. And there, behind the massive mahogany desk, hung a large painting of the original Hawthorne patriarch. She crossed the room quickly, heart hammering. She knew what to look for. Eleanor had told her. "Behind the painting, child, that's where Charles hides the things he doesn't want the world to see." Riley gripped the edges of the frame and pulled. He swung forward on hidden hinges with a soft groan. Behind it, a sleek steel safe embedded in the wall. And on the keypad, blinking softly, waited a combination. Riley's fingers trembled as she entered the only date that made sense. The night Andrew and Helena Hawthorne had died. September 4th, 2005. The lock clicked. The safe door swung open. Inside, there were ledgers, bank records, stacks of papers stamped with seals of ownership, evidence of decades of greed. But tucked between the files was something else. A small, delicate envelope, yellowed with age. On the front, in flowing script, "To my daughter, Ray Evelyn Hawthorne." Riley's knees buckled. She sank onto the carpet, the envelope clutched in both hands. Tears blurred her vision as she carefully broke the seal. Inside was a letter. Her mother's voice reached across the years, trembling but fierce. "My dearest, Ray. If you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. Your father and I knew we were in danger. We tried everything to protect you. Trust no one, not even family, especially not Charles. He covets what is not his. He would destroy anyone who stands between him and power. But you, my little sunbeam, you are stronger than he will ever understand. Never forget who you are. You are not an orphan. You are not abandoned. He would rather die. You are loved beyond measure. Be brave. Find the truth. Reclaim your life. All our love." The letter slipped from Riley's shaking hands, fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. She pressed both hands over her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. Her mother had known.
She had tried to protect her. And Charles, her own uncle, had stolen everything.
Her name, her family, her future. Suddenly, footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Panic surged through Riley. She scrambled to shove the papers into her bag, clutching the letter to her chest. The door swung open with a crash. Charles Hawthorne filled the doorway, his face a thundercloud of cold fury. He didn't shout, however.
He just stared at her, the intruder, the ghost of a past he had worked so hard to erase. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "I was wondering when you'd start sniffing where you don't belong." Riley forced herself to stand, though her legs trembled. "I know everything," she said, her voice cracking but strong. "I know what you did to my parents. I know who I am." Charles laughed, low and humorless. "You think anyone will believe the word of a foundling over me?" he sneered. "You were a mistake, Ray, just like your father. Too soft, too weak." "I have proof," Riley snapped. "Documents, letters, the truth." Charles's eyes darkened. "Then you're not walking out of here?" He lunged. Riley ducked just in time, bolting past him, adrenaline flooding her veins. She tore through the study, down the corridor, heart slamming against her ribs. Shouts erupted behind her. Security, Charles's dogs. But Riley didn't stop. Not when her lungs burned. Not when her legs screamed. She burst through the service door into the stormy night, rain soaking her to the skin. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. Tires screeched as she sped away from the Hawthorne estate, clutching the soaked envelope against her chest like a lifeline. Behind her, Charles Hawthorne stood in the driveway, his empire trembling. Ahead of her, the headlights cut through the mist, carving a path into an uncertain future. But one thing was certain now. Riley wasn't running from her past anymore. She was running toward justice. And this time, she wasn't going to stop until every secret was dragged into the light.
Section 5. The race against time. The rain pounded harder as Riley Bennett's car tore through the winding back roads of Charleston, her windshield wipers struggling against the furious downpour. Her soaked catering uniform clung to her skin. The leather bag on the passenger seat held her mother's final letter. Documents proving Charles Hawthorne's conspiracy. Bank records tracing the hush money. Everything she needed to expose the monster who had stolen her life. Everything Charles would destroy her for if he caught her. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had one chance. One shot to blow open the carefully crafted Hawthorne legacy, built on blood and betrayal. The investigative journalist she had secretly contacted days ago, Ben Wicker, was waiting for her. Ben was a bulldog reporter, the kind who had made enemies out of half the city's elite and survived to write about it. If anyone could get her story out before Charles buried her in silence, it was him. Riley hit speed dial on her crack phone. The call rang once, twice. Then, Whitaker, a rough voice barked. "It's me," Riley panted. "I have it. The proof. I'm coming now." "Good," Ben said quickly. "But listen. I've been followed tonight. You're not safe. You need to get here fast and don't take the main road." Riley's stomach twisted. Of course Charles would move fast. She wasn't just a lost heir anymore. She was a threat that needed silencing. She swerved off the main highway, tires skidding across the wet asphalt, and took the back routes Ben had told her about. The city lights faded behind her, swallowed by darkness. The only sound was the hammering of rain and the frantic thud of her own heart. Every headlight that flashed in her rearview mirror made her breath hitch. Was it Charles's men? Was she already too late? But Riley clenched her jaw. No. She had come too far to give up now. 30 minutes later, she pulled into a crumbling parking lot behind an abandoned diner on the outskirts of town. The meeting spot. A battered pickup truck idled near the dumpster. Ben Whitaker stepped out, wearing a rain slicker, his face half hidden by the hood. Riley grabbed the bag and ran toward him, her sneakers splashing in puddles. "You got it?" Ben asked urgently. She nodded, shoving the bag into his hands. "You need to get this to the press, now," she gasped. "Letters, documents, bank trails, it's all there." Ben flipped open the bag and scanned the contents quickly. His eyes widened. "This is bigger than I thought," he muttered. "This could take down Charles Hawthorne and half the board members he's bought off." "Then do it," Riley begged, "before they find me." Ben hesitated, then nodded grimly. "I'll leak it to 3 outlets tonight. If I vanish, they'll still run it." Before he could say anything else, headlights swung around the corner. A black SUV. Riley's blood froze. Ben cursed under his breath. "Go," he barked, shoving the bag under his coat. "I'll distract them." "No," Riley hissed. "I hurt you." Ben gave her a lopsided grin. "Sweetheart, I've been threatened by worse than Hawthorne goons. Now move." With no choice, Riley darted into the night, lungs burning, heart slamming. Behind her, tires screeched. Voices shouted. But she didn't look back. She couldn't. She didn't stop running until she reached an all-night bus station. Panting, soaked to the bone, she ducked into a grimy restroom stall and collapsed onto the seat. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a single sob.
Just one. Then she wiped her face and pulled out her phone. One bar of signal. She opened a news app and waited. Minutes dragged by like hours. She refreshed the feed again and again, and then breaking news. Scandal rocks Hawthorne Empire investigation into fraud and cover-up Monchit. Riley clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. It was happening. Ben had gotten the story out. The world was finally seeing the Hawthorns for who they really were. And Charles's empire was beginning to crumble. But Riley knew better than to think it was over. Charles wasn't the type to go down quietly. He would fight. He would come for her. And she had just painted a target on her back, bigger than ever before. But as she stared at the breaking headlines flashing across her cracked phone screen, a fierce, trembling smile broke over her face. She wasn't the scared little girl hidden away anymore. She was Evelyn Hawthorne, and she was ready for whatever came next.
Section 6. A trap at the mansion. The headlines roared across Charleston like a wildfire. Hawthorne dynasty in crisis, fraud cover-up and a stolen air race. Everywhere Riley Bennett turned, whispers followed. People were finally questioning the empire that had seemed untouchable for generations. But Riley didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because she knew Charles Hawthorne, and men like him didn't surrender. They set traps. They struck when you were most vulnerable, and tonight, he was going to strike. The message came through a blocked number just after sunset. A text, short and chilling. Meet me at the estate, alone. I have answers about your mother. Riley stared at the screen, heart pounding. Her mother. The mother she barely remembered, the one she believed was dead. Was this a trick? Almost certainly. Was it worth the risk? She thought of the letter, of the promise her mother had made. Be brave, find the truth. If there was even a chance her mother was alive, Riley had to take it, even if it meant walking straight into the lion's den.
That night, the Hawthorne estate loomed before her like a sleeping beast under the silver light of the moon. She parked far away behind the old greenhouse ruins and approached on foot, her sneakers silent against the wet grass. The mansion was dark except for a faint light glowing in the third-floor window, Charles's study, the same place where this all began, the same place it would end. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Though a party, no stuff, no string quartet playing polite lies, just silence. Heavy. Expectant. Riley's every instinct screamed at her to run. But she forced herself forward, up the grand staircase, her hands skimming the worn banister for balance. At the end of the corridor, the study door stood ajar, golden light spilling out in a narrow beam. She pushed it open. Charles Hawthorne stood behind his massive desk, hands folded calmly, as if this were just another business meeting. Except tonight, there was no mask, no polished smile, no false civility. Only the cold, ruthless man he truly was. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, he said, his voice silky with venom. Riley stayed near the door, muscles tense to bolt if she had to. You said you had information about my mother, she said, forcing her voice steady. Charles smiled. A predator's smile. I do, he said. And if you cooperate, I might even let you see her. Riley's heart hammered. Was it possible? Could her mother still be alive? Where is she? Riley demanded. Charles tisked softly. First, you're going to hand over everything you stole. The documents, the letter, all of it. Riley's hands curled into fists at her sides. I don't have them anymore, she lied. Charles's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth, she said. I gave them to the press. It's over. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Charles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Nothing is over until I say it is. Before Riley could react, movement flickered at the edges of her vision. Two men stepped out from the shadows. Security guards, bigger and meaner than any she had seen before. Wrapped? She backed toward the door, but one of the guards blocked it with a grim smile. Panic clawed at her throat. Charles's voice followed her like smoke. "You can make this easy, Ray," he said, using her real name like a weapon. "Come back into the fold, keep your mouth shut, live comfortably." Or he let the threat dangle or disappear. Like her parents, Riley's mind raced. She needed time, a distraction, a miracle. "You said my mother," she blurted out, desperate. "Where is she?" Charles's smile widened. "Closer than you think." He pressed a button under his desk. A hidden panel slid open in the wall behind him, and there, through a small glass window, Riley saw her. A woman, frail and pale, seated in a dimly lit room, her hands folded in her lap. Even through the glass, Riley recognized her mother's eyes. The same soft blue, the same sorrow etched deep by time and loss. Riley's knees buckled. It was real. Her mother was alive. Charles's voice cut through her shock. "If you behave, you can see her again. If not," he shrugged. "Well, accidents happen all the time." Riley's vision blurred with rage. They had stolen everything from her. Her parents, her childhood, her name. And now they thought they could barter her mother's life like a pawn? Not this time. I think it's a tough one, not ever again. Before the guards could close in, Riley acted on pure instinct. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the desk and hurled it at the glass. It shattered with an explosion of sound. Alarms blared. The guards lunged, but Riley was faster. Fueled by a lifetime of stolen memories and untold grief, she scrambled through the broken window into the hidden room. Her mother looked up, dazed, blinking at the sudden chaos. "Mom!" Riley sobbed, grabbing her hand. "It's me. It's Ray." Recognition flickered across her mother's face, like the sun rising after a lifetime of darkness. "Ray," she whispered hoarsely, tears spilling down her cheeks. The moment shattered Riley's heart into 1,000 pieces and stitched it back together all at once. But there was no time for reunions. The guards were coming. The world was burning, and Riley wasn't going to lose her mother again. Not now, never. Gripping her mother's hand tightly, Riley pulled her toward the emergency exit. Behind them, Charles's furious roar echoed through the estate. "You'll regret this," he bellowed. But Riley didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because this time, she wasn't the frightened girl lost in the corridors of someone else's story. She was Ray Evelyn Hawthorne, and she was finally writing her own ending.
Section 7. The beginning of the end. The night Riley Bennett escaped the Hawthorne estate with her mother clutched tightly at her side, Charleston wept with rain. The city lights blurred behind the downpour as Riley drove blindly, her only focus keeping the frail woman beside her safe. They didn't stop until they reached a small motel on the outskirts of town, a no-name place with flickering neon and rooms that smelled of mildew and forgotten dreams. But safe for now. Inside the room, Riley wrapped her mother Helena Hawthorne in a warm blanket, her hands trembling. Her mother's eyes, once so bright, were foggy now, shadowed with trauma and lost time. But as Riley knelt before her, taking her weathered hands into her own, something broke open between them. A recognition that no years, no lies, could erase. "Marg," Riley choked out, tears streaming freely down her face. "I'm here. It's really me, it's Ray." Helena's lips trembled. Slowly, achingly, she reached out and brushed Riley's hair back from her face, just like she must have done 1,000 times before memory stole her away. "My sunbeam," Helena whispered, voice cracked and raw with emotion. "You beautiful girl." They collapsed into each other's arms, mother and daughter, two broken halves finding their way home. The sobs that racked them weren't just grief. They were freedom. They were life returning to places inside them both that had been dark for far too long. Hours later, after the tears had ebbed into soft murmurs, Riley sat at the edge of the bed, watching her mother sleep. The old letter lay beside her, the one Helena had written all those years ago. Be brave. Find the truth. Riley had done it. Against all odds, against all power and money and fear, she had found her truth. But the fight wasn't over. Charles Hawthorne was still out there, and now he would be more dangerous than ever. Because Riley hadn't just exposed his crimes to the press, she had brought back the one person who could destroy him completely. Helena Hawthorne, rightful heir to the Hawthorne fortune and name. The next morning, the motel TV blared breaking news. Charles Hawthorne, under criminal investigation. Sources say missing heiress found alive. The world was waking up. The empire Charles had built on lies was starting to fall like rotten stone. Lawyers called. Journalists camped outside the Hawthorne gates. Former allies turned into vultures, desperate to distance themselves from the sinking ship. And somewhere deep in his crumbling castle, Riley knew Charles Hawthorne was raging and plotting. By noon, a federal investigator named Agent Dana Whitmore, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with Ice Cube on the motel door. Ben Whitaker had sent her. Riley opened the door cautiously, relief flooding her at the sight of the badge. Riley Bennett, Agent Whitmore asked briskly. Or should I say, Ray Evelyn Hawthorne? Riley smiled tightly. Both, she said. Depends who's asking. Agent Whitmore's lips twitched, almost a smile. We have enough evidence to bring Charles Hawthorne down, she said. Your testimony, your mother's statement, and the documents you recovered. It's more than enough. Riley's heart pounded. We need you both to testify, Whitmore continued. In court, publicly. Riley glanced back at her mother, who had risen weakly from the bed, her hands still trembling but her chin high. There was fear in Helena's eyes. But there was something else too. A strength that had survived all those stolen years. I'll testify, Riley said without hesitation. And so will my mother. Helena stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. They stole my life, she said. They tried to erase my daughter. I won't let them win. Whitmore nodded, respect flashing in her eyes. Good, because once you step into that courtroom, there's no going back. Riley squared her shoulders. I don't want to go back, she said softly. I want the world to know exactly who we are. That evening, as the motel room dimmed with sunset, Riley and Helena sat side by side on the narrow bed, holding hands. No riches, no estate, no title, just two survivors, two warriors, and daughter. At last, somewhere far away, behind the crumbling walls of his empire, Charles Hawthorne surely felt it. The end was coming for him. Not with a whisper, but with the roar of a truth too powerful to be silenced anymore. Section 8. The Trial of the Century. The courthouse in downtown Charleston had never seen anything like it. Cameras flashed in a blinding storm. Reporters shouted over one another. The heavy oak doors groaned as they opened, revealing a packed gallery of spectators and press, all craning their necks for a glimpse of the spectacle unfolding inside. The trial of Charles Hawthorne, once the untouchable king of Charleston's high society, had officially begun. And at the heart of it all, walking steadily through the doors in a simple navy suit, her mother's hand in hers, was Riley Bennett. Ray Evelyn Hawthorne. No longer a forgotten child, no longer a shadow, but a force ready to tear down an empire built on lies. The prosecution was swift and brutal. Document after document laid bare Charles's crimes. Embezzlement, inheritance fraud, conspiracy to cover up the deaths of Andrew and Helena Hawthorne, attempted kidnapping, illegal imprisonment. The jury sat in stunned silence as each piece of evidence unfolded like a bombshell. The once proud Hawthorne name cracked and splintered before their eyes. Riley sat tall through it all, feeling the weight of every whispered conversation, every accusing stare. But she didn't falter. She owed it to her parents, to herself, to the little girl she used to be. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Her testimonies. Riley was called first. As she stood and walked to the witness stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and faced the sea of strangers, including Charles Hawthorne, sitting at the defense table, his face carved from granite, his eyes burning with barely contained rage. The prosecutor approached gently. "Please state your full name for the record." Riley took a steadying breath. "Ray Evelyn Hawthorne." The name echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Charles's jaw tightened. Riley told them everything. How she had grown up with no memory of her past. How she discovered the photo at the estate. How she uncovered the safe, the letter, the truth. She spoke of Eleanor, of Marcus, of the warnings, of the night she found her mother locked away like a ghost. And every word was a blade sinking deeper into the rotten heart of Charles's defense. When the prosecutor finished, the defense attorney rose. A slick, silver-haired man who smiled too easily. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, pacing slowly, "isn't it true you have no actual memory of your life before adoption?" "Yes," Riley said calmly. "And isn't it true that memories can be fabricated over time?" Riley smiled faintly. "I didn't find memories," she said. "I found evidence, documents, a living witness." She turned slightly, locking eyes with her mother sitting behind the rail. "My mother?" The defense attorney faltered. No argument could erase the living, breathing proof sitting just feet away. Next came Helena Hawthorne herself. The entire courtroom rose as she approached the stand, frail but unbroken. Helena's voice trembled as she began, but soon it grew stronger with every word. She told them how Charles coveted the Hawthorne estate, how he resented Andrew, how there were threats, subtle at first, then terrifying. She spoke of the night she and Andrew realized they were being watched, of the brakes cut, of the trap that had been laid for them, and of her waking up in a hospital, disoriented, controlled, drugged. Of Charles telling her Andrew and their daughter were dead. Of years locked away in a private clinic, stripped of her past, her identity, her hope. When Helena finished, the entire courtroom sat in stunned, breathless silence. Even the defense attorney seemed shaken. No spin could disguise it now. Charles Hawthorne hadn't just stolen an empire. He had tried to erase an entire family to get it. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The forewoman stood, voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant Charles Hawthorne guilty on all counts." The courtroom exploded in noise. Cameras flashed. People gasped. And Charles Hawthorne, once the most powerful man in the city, sat motionless, his empire reduced to ash around him. As the bailiff cuffed his wrists, he turned and caught Riley's eye. There was no apology there, only hatred and fear. Because for the first time in his life, Charles Hawthorne had lost. Later, as Riley and Helena stood on the courthouse steps, the press surged toward them. Questions flew like arrows. "What will you do now, Miss Hawthorne? Are you taking back the Hawthorne estate? Will you rebuild the legacy?" Riley looked at her mother, who gave a small, proud nod. She turned back to the microphones, her voice clear and strong. "I'm not here to rebuild what Charles destroyed," she said. I'm here to build something better. Cheers erupted from the crowd. Tears streamed down strangers' faces. Because this wasn't just a trial. It was a resurrection of a family, of a name, of a future no longer stolen. Section 9. New beginnings. The whirlwind of the trial faded, but the ripples it left behind changed everything. The Hawthorne name, once synonymous with untouchable wealth and influence, now stood for betrayal, greed, and finally, justice. And Riley Bennett, no, Ray Evelyn Hawthorne, became a symbol not of scandal, but of survival, of hope, of what happens when truth refuses to die. The offers came flooding in. Law firms begging to manage her inheritance, luxury brands wanting her to represent a fresh new face of resilience, investors, socialites, even distant family members she had never heard of, suddenly desperate to reconnect. But Riley turned them all away. She wasn't interested in rebuilding an empire based on a legacy of pain. She didn't want marble mansions or headlines. She wanted something real. Something her parents would have been proud of. Something she could be proud of. Instead of reclaiming the Hawthorne estate, Riley donated it, piece by crumbling piece, to the Charleston Historical Trust. The grand halls where power had once whispered behind closed doors would now be open to the public. The ballroom where secret deals were made would host charity galas and weddings. The gardens where Riley's childhood was stolen would bloom again, this time for everyone. No more secrets. No more lies. Only life and growth. As for the fortune itself, Riley used part of it to build something entirely new. The Sunbeam Foundation, named after the nickname her mother once whispered into her ear long ago. A place for orphans, for abandoned children, for the forgotten and the broken-hearted, for kids just like she had been, left behind by a world too busy, too cruel, or too afraid to care. In a small sunlit building near the sea, laughter echoed through the halls. Paintings covered the walls. Tiny feet ran down bright corridors. And in every smile, Riley saw a reflection of what she had fought so hard to find. Family, a belonging, a second chance. At the heart of it all was Helena Hawthorne. Though the years had weighed heavily on her, Helena found strength every day in watching her daughter thrive. Her mind, though fragile, sharpened with each passing week. Memory returned in small bursts. The smell of rain on the old garden paths. The sound of Riley's laughter chasing butterflies. The soft songs she used to hum at bedtime. And with every memory regained, Hella healed. So did Riley. One golden afternoon, mother and daughter sat on the porch of their modest new home in Vermont, far from the glittering prisons of Charleston's old money. Riley rocked slowly in a wicker chair, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. Helena knitted a soft yellow scarf, her fingers nimble despite the tremors. The sun dipped low, bathing the hills in a flood of honeyed light. For the first time in her life, Riley didn't feel lost, didn't feel empty. She felt found. You know, Helena said, her voice soft but steady, your father, he would have been so proud of you.
Riley swallowed the lump rising in her throat. I just wish he could see this, she whispered. Helena set her knitting down and reached for Riley's hand. Does, she said. Every time you fight for someone who's forgotten. Every time you stand up when it would be easier to stay quiet. Every time you choose love over bitterness. Tears filled Riley's eyes, hot and blinding. She squeezed her mother's hand. I love you, Mom, she said fiercely. Helena smiled, tears sparkling in her own eyes. I love you too, my sunbeam. They sat there as the sun disappeared behind the hills, wrapped in silence and the unspoken promise that no matter what darkness had once stolen from them, it could never steal their light again. They were survivors. They were a family. And together, they had rewritten the story the world tried to bury, not with revenge, not with anger, but with love, and with a future that would shine far brighter than any fortune ever could.
Section 10. The Promise of Tomorrow. The seasons shifted softly in Vermont. Winter melted into spring, and the hills surrounding Riley Bennett's small home bloomed into a tapestry of green and gold. Each sunrise felt like a quiet miracle, a reminder that even after the longest winters, life could find its way back. So could hearts. So could hope. On a bright April morning, Riley stood before a group of children gathered at the newly opened Sunbeam Community Center. Their faces shone with curiosity, mischief, and something more precious: possibility. These were children who had been told in one way or another that they didn't belong, that they weren't enough, that their stories didn't matter. But today, Riley stood as living proof that stories could be rewritten, that broken beginnings could lead to beautiful endings. She smiled warmly, her voice carrying across the sunlit lawn. "I want you all to remember something," she said, crouching down to their eye level. "But it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who tries to tell you that you're not good enough. What matters is what's inside you, the love you give, the courage you show, the family you choose." The kids nodded, some solemn, some fidgeting, each absorbing her words in their own quiet way. Riley's heart swelled. This was the legacy she wanted. Not marble statues, not gold-plated names, but lives change, futures reclaimed, second chances given. Later that afternoon, she returned home to find Helena sitting on the porch, a book resting in her lap. Her mother's eyes, once so lost, now sparkled with quiet joy. "How was it, Sunbeam?" Helena asked, smiling. Riley sank into the chair beside her, letting the soft breeze wash over them. "Perfect," she said simply. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the world turn slowly around them. The world they had fought so hard to reach. The world they had nearly lost, and finally won back. As the first stars blinked into the purple sky, Helena reached over and placed something in Riley's hand. It was a locket. Small, delicate, worn smooth by time. Riley opened it carefully. Inside were two tiny pictures. One of Andrew and Helena, young and radiant, holding a laughing baby girl in their arms. The other, a blank space, empty but waiting. Helena's voice was a whisper. "For the family you'll build someday." Tears blurred Riley's vision. She closed the locket gently, cradling it to her chest. "I promise," she said, "to carry our love into tomorrow. No matter what." In that quiet moment, under the soft sweep of stars, Riley made a vow. She would never let the past define her. She would honor the love that had fought through death, betrayal, and years of silence to reach her. She would be the woman her parents had believed she could become. Compassionate, fearless. Because real wealth wasn't measured in estates or bank accounts. It was measured in the lives you touched, the hearts you healed, the love you dared to give and receive, even after the world had tried to convince you it wasn't safe. As the night deepened and the world fell into a hush, Riley whispered one final truth to herself. "The past may have written my beginning, that I choose how the story ends. And this ending, this bright, brave, beautiful ending, it was just the beginning of everything." Conclusion. Sometimes life tears you away from everything you know, everything you love, and leaves you standing alone, wondering if you ever truly belonged anywhere. That was Riley's journey. A little girl abandoned, a waitress forgotten, a lost heir hidden in the shadows of greed and betrayal. But Riley's story reminds us of something powerful, that no matter how broken your past may seem, you are not defined by where you came from. You are defined by the courage you find within yourself to seek the truth, to fight for what's right, to choose love over fear, to create your own family, your own home, your own future. Riley didn't rebuild the Hawthorne empire out of bitterness. She didn't seek revenge. She built something better, a legacy of hope, of second chances, of love strong enough to outshine the darkest betrayal. If Riley's story touched your heart, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that family is more than blood, and that no storm can erase your worth, please drop A in the comments. Tell us, have you ever had to fight for your truth? Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Lesson from Riley's story. Your past does not define you, your choices do. Riley was abandoned, invisible, and forgotten, but she didn't let that become her ending. She chose truth, she chose love, she chose to rise. And so can you. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who stays when everything falls apart. Riley didn't find her family in the ones who shared her name, but in those who stood by her when she had nothing. That's what real family is. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the most powerful form of healing. Instead of revenge, Riley chose to rebuild. She turned her pain into purpose and her scars into strength. Even if the world forgets you, your worth remains. Riley was hidden, erased from her birthright, but her value never disappeared. She became more than an heiress. She became a force of hope. You can still be the light even after years of living in the dark. Riley's journey reminds us that no matter how broken you've been, you can still shine and change the world with your story.
Thank you for watching this Millionaire Love Stories today. Every love story is a journey, filled with passion, heartbreak, and unforgettable moments. And here at Millionaire Love Stories, we bring you the most captivating tales of love, wealth, and destiny. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget, like to support more incredible content. Comment your thoughts. Would you choose love over riches? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Millionaire Love Stories, because love knows no limits. Because love changes everything. See you in the next story.